Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. WeatherBrains episode number 864. The weekly show all about weather. This is the pre-show. It is the magical, marvelous, wonderful time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say outrageous things. Hey, we're back on Monday nights. The gang's all here. Vacation week is done. So my next week off will be the week after Christmas. So we're going to be here every Monday night, but let's quickly get a few things done here. Let's get the embed code going and see if we can get the regular. Well, actually, I think everybody was invited early this week. We have so many people coming on the show tonight that Bill wanted to get the invites out very early. So accordingly, I think we have some people waiting to get on the show here. Wow. Never happens this early. It's like 48 until the top of the hour here. We got a 12-minute pre-show. This could be the longest pre-show in the history of WeatherBrains. So let's just bring them in. But yeah, I had a little week off last week. And for those that are new to this, I typically get 3 weeks every year. 1 week in late June, 1 week in early August, and the other week is typically the week after Christmas. And that's it. Other than that, I don't get out that much. Occasionally, I'll slip away and speak at a conference or attend a conference. But we're a little short-staffed here, and that's just not going to happen. So I am just here. Bill Murray, look at all of our guests showing up. How about that?
I know. That's what happens when you send the invite early.
We're never this organized. We are never, ever, ever this organized.
Now we have to sit around and talk to each other for 10 minutes. We never had that problem, do we?
No, it's like we got 11 minutes before the top of the hour here. This is like a world record. But the object of the pre-show is to share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and say outrageous things. So maybe somebody here would like to share one of those three types of stories. Most of my stories are boring, very boring personal stories. I'm not funny. I don't do humorous anecdotes, and I've tried to muzzle myself and stop saying outrageous things as much as I used to in my old age.
You could show some vacation slides from last week, man.
You know, we didn't go anywhere. I was kind of a nurse. My wife had a little procedure, and so I was a nurse for a few days. So.
Oh, okay.
But I'm a good nurse. I can make that.
I bet you are. You run a hospital. You should be.
Yeah, man. I could be a med surge floor nurse all day long.
Bedside manner.
You got that right. You got that right.
So how are you, James and Bill? How are you guys
doing?
doing?
Dr. Marks. How are
Hello,
you?
Frank.
Oh, Frank.
Hello,
Frank is
Jim.
on the show. Yeah.
I think Frank gets the award for the best background.
I was going to say, that's a heck of a Zoom background there.
Wow. Wow.
Well, you know, I have to show off our assets.
Well,
I don't have any, but Noah does.
That's all right. That's some nice ones back there.
That's Frank's 2 planes that he owns.
There you go.
Yeah, I wish, Jim. You own them, Jim. I get to play with them.
Never a truer statement was spoken.
Yeah, everybody on this podcast owns them. I just get to play.
Yeah.
How's our
Good to
audio,
see you.
James?
We're so excited
Do you
to
have
be
Jim and Dorna's audio good?
Yes, everybody sounds great. Sounds like $1 million. $1 million.
Hey, Dorna, glad you could join us.
Thank you very much for including me. Looking forward to this.
Aren't you looking pretty tonight, you?
I like the gray,
Wow.
Dorna. I like
Wow.
the gray.
No, it's not gray. It's white.
Platinum.
There's the first cat sighting of the night right there.
That's right. You haven't seen me since I went a la natural.
Yeah, she
No.
dyes it
Wow.
that color. She's normally a brunette, but she dyes it this color, right?
Right.
There's those outrageous stories, James.
But this show is going right down the tubes already.
Really?
Hey, I see Carl Silverman is in here and Mike Steinberg.
Yeah,
Michael
hi.
and Carl, how are you all?
I've also gone natural. Haven't shaved in a while.
There
Wow.
you go.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
there's the cat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Carl might have a shuttle or something parked in his hangar back there when he
Oh,
came
but
on.
I do have, I don't know if you can see it, but I have Mr. Witt's mug here.
Hey! No, that's a cup mug I got on the top of my neck.
Boy, we got an all-star cast here tonight.
Oh, yes.
Hey,
No,
Jim
there's no doubt we're going to
inspired
lose
an all-star
control, but I
cast.
like it. I like it. We're going to lose control of this show, but I like it. Could be the best one ever.
I
I
spent
see
years
Jordan
trying to keep.
Alpert and Greg Tripoli coming online. That's
Really?
a great.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, I
Greggy?
spent years trying to keep Jim under control when we were working together, and it never worked.
Never
No,
worked.
no, it will
Never
never
worked.
happen. Never.
I
Never.
wrote
Well,
on
I
the
see.
walls and everything.
Yeah, I see Frank is just hanging around or hangering around.
Right.
Oh, look at the beard he has. This
Oh,
guy.
hi, Dad. I like it.
Hey,
Jordan, we're not getting your audio, Jordan.
Oh, you know what? Let me go get my earbuds so I can, or is my sound okay, or should I do that?
You
You're
sound
okay.
fine, Mike.
The audio
Yeah.
sounds great. If you've got earbuds, that would probably help just to eliminate any feedback issues.
Say
If we're
something,
not
Jordan.
getting any now, we probably won't.
You're probably correct. Zoom typically is pretty good about that. I mean, a lot of people don't use earbuds, so yeah, you're probably good. All right, so I see
Great.
See,
Jen.
Jordan is there. Jordan,
Yeah,
we
Jordan.
can't hear you.
Yeah. Check your audio, Jordan, on the settings.
Oh, you're muted. That's it.
He muted,
Come on now.
unmuted.
He was
Is-
muted.
Try it now, Jordan. You're unmuted. Nope.
Oh.
I'm just going to call him Dad because that's what his
Yeah.
name tag says there. Dear old Dad.
We got to
This
get
is like
And we cannot just
Lakeland High reunion here.
it is.
and FYI, we cannot start the show until the top of the hour. It's in 5 minutes because we the simulcasts on local television. We're on YouTube live now, and then we'll hit the television at the top of the hour, and then we can shake and bake here.
So the public can hear us. fooling
The
around right now.
YouTubers are this is the pre-show. The YouTubers love the pre-show because this is where the good stuff happens. This part does not get in the
Okay.
audio podcast.
Okay, what stories can we tell now?
Yeah.
There you
No,
go.
let's save it for the audio. The audio listeners get mad if we dump the good stuff in the pre-show here.
Oh, hey, one other thing that I didn't have in that email I sent
Uh-oh.
was when my senior year, we went over to Jim Witt's house, about 6 of us from the Weather Club. We went over to his house on Christmas Eve, and we performed a musical that I wrote, which was called My Spare Snowstorm, which told the story of Jim Heck and I making a bet with Jim about a gigantic blizzard that was going to hit beautiful downtown Shrub Oak in a few days. And of course, we were totally wrong. It was going to be about 95 and sunny, but the Russians had a new cold bomb, which they decided to deploy over that great capital of American motherhood, apple pie, and everything good about the United States, beautiful downtown Shrub Oak. And when they deployed it, it caused the temperature to immediately drop 100 degrees, causing all the water vapor to precipitate out as snow. So we won the bet. And it had about 8 songs in it, all to the tune of songs from My Fair Lady.
Oh,
That's some
Yeah,
talent there, Mike.
The wonderful finale.
I
I
haven't heard
have
that.
often plowed on this street before, but I've never plowed 100,000 feet before.
I've not heard that story before.
Now, I think Dorna has a picture of you in some shorts, Mike. Was that
Yeah,
related
that
to
was-
that bet somehow?
Yes, indeed. That was when we sang Mary Had a Little Lamb.
I remember that.
You know, my mother was a substitute teacher that day, and she, along with about 5 other teachers, brought their classes into our room to watch us do it.
That was by invite, Mike, in case you didn't know it.
I didn't know that.
I
The
went
truth
around
comes
and I
out.
got all the teachers to bring their kids into this class
Boy, you were evil.
Oh,
Evil,
terrible.
I say.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I had you guys on the hook, no doubt. Oh.
No, you sent me the words to that too, Mike. Somewhere I have those.
Eight stanzas.
Yeah, Jim Hack and I decided since we were going to publicly humiliate ourselves, we might as well not hold anything back and go all the way. So we wrote about 5 extra verses, including the final one. We had a little horn that would beep. And the final verse was, Mr. Witt's a Hong Kong Kong, Kong Kong Kong, Kong Kong Kong. Mr. Witt's a Hong Kong Kong. He is one naturally.
Hey, I see Mr.
The rhyme.
Hey, Mike, Mr. G
Yeah.
has just joined us. I see that.
I
Hello,
see.
Ernie.
If I
Hey,
hear
Herb.
if I hear that song again, I'm getting off.
You got to go through it
How are
one
you,
more
Irv?
time, Irv.
Hey, Greg, Greg Tripoli, you gonna have camera here?
Yeah.
You're not
He
on
wants to
camera.
see your beard, Greg. He wants to see the beard.
I don't believe you're there.
We can hear him though. Or can
Yeah,
we?
I don't think we can hear him or see him.
no.
Unless he's being awfully quiet.
Maybe he listened and he decided to hang up and run, which
He was
often happens
smart.
with our guests here.
That's a
Yeah,
possibility.
Well,
yeah. This is the time to get out right now.
you know, that happens an awful lot with me. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of this. There's actually no such thing as COVID. The whole thing is a plot by people to get me to wear a mask whenever I'm in public.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
All right.
Greg.
We'll be here till
Here he
midnight.
is. Here he
Here till
is.
midnight.
Hey, Greg, how are
Say
you?
something, Greg. Greg, say something. Can he hear us?
Hello.
Greg,
Can't hear us.
he can't hear us.
He's working on it. And Jordan's
And
reconnecting.
He's
Maybe
connecting.
he has a
now.
mute button on.
He has the mute
so
button
we
on.
are
I don't
at the
know.
top of the hour. So let us welcome our television viewers. We're going to start WeatherBrains at 8:64 right now. So let me get the recorders going. We're going to get this show started. And I think, Bill, I'm just going to go right to you. This is going to be wild. This is going to be totally wild. So for the regulars, y'all just bear with us. All right. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey. This is WeatherBrains episode number 864, the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 8th of August, 2022, the dog days of summer. This could be a fun show. I know, I feel it in my bones, Bill Murray, I feel it in my bones. So I'm going to let you set it up and let everybody just take over. So explain what we got going on here.
Well, James, when I was a young person, I was obviously very interested in weather, and I used to go to the library and read the Weatherwise magazine. And, I would read back issues because I was, this was about 1974, 75. But there was this issue about the Lakeland Weather Club. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Why couldn't my school have one of those weather clubs? But that article in 1967 got a reprise in 2022, 55 years later, just tracking all the amazing people that were part of the Weather Club. And tonight, Dorna Schroeder is with us. She is the author of that article. And I understand, Dorna, that about half of it ended up on the editor's cutting room floor. And you still managed somehow to get 8 pages and some fabulous photographs into it. So I hope you have lots of stories tonight that are that maybe didn't make it into the magazine article. I bet. I don't think
Right
we're
from the
having any
source.
trouble. That's for sure. Tonight, we're honored to have an incredible group of people who share a common legacy, and we're simultaneously going to break the Guinness Book World Records for the most WeatherBrains guests in one night. So I'm going to steal from one of our guests' writing tonight.
Hey,
to
Mike, this is
introduce-
James out in the weather. Do have a severe weather ticker for you.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Hey, James.
Let me mute James here.
There we
Yeah,
go.
there we go.
But this is from one of our guests tonight, and they wrote about our main guest, WeatherBrain. Most in the field of meteorology have probably never heard of Jim Witt, but he has had more impact on the field than almost any other person. It's fair, in fact, to say that without his initiative and inspiration, none of the meteorologists in this show tonight would have had careers in meteorology, and their accomplishments would not have happened. And even beyond his influence on meteorology, his positive impact on the thousands of kids he's taught, charitable undertakings have benefited humanity in innumerable ways. And ultimately, he was nominated by his former students and recognized with an AMS Special Award for his innovative leadership in teaching meteorology at the high school level, mentoring and inspiring his students to accomplishments in the meteorological community and in life. Jim Witt, we're so thrilled to have you here tonight. So lucky to get to talk to you. That's high praise from one of your students, and that's Mike Steinberg, who is on the show tonight also. Mike, I guess you must have written that for the award, you and the other nominators back in what, 2011? Was that when that was, Mike?
Yeah, around then. But, while I was the one who kind of oversaw the nomination, and I think I might have even suggested it because for many years I oversaw that function, nominating and overseeing the process for where I worked for the AMS Awards. The fact is that as soon as I sent emails around to Jim's former students and colleagues, everyone was, wow, boy, if anyone ever deserves an award, it's him. What can I do to help? And it wasn't just my nominating letter, it was also supporting letters from several other students of Jim who went on to have just incredible careers in the field. And all of us who have interacted with them, who've had our lives changed for the better by Jim Witt, as well as when you come right down to it, everyone around the world who's been impacted by the improvements in weather forecasting that have come about because of his students and the way he inspired us all. We should all be very thankful to him.
So Mike, since I stole that introduction from you, I'm going to let you go first and tell us what the Lakeland Weather Club was about and how you came to be involved. I think that's a great story.
Okay,
and don't worry, Jim, you're going to get the chance to cross-examine all these witnesses.
Well, I came to be involved. My family actually moved on my 15th birthday in the summer of 1967. And we moved from a suburb of Baltimore to Yorktown Heights, New York, where the new high school I was attending, Lakeland High School, just had this unique opportunity. And somewhere early in my career at Lakeland, someone said, hey, did you hear about the Weather Club? You should join it. And I said, okay. So I joined the Weather Club. The next day, someone said to me, hey, you should really join the debate club. And I said, well, I just joined the Weather Club. Let me stick with one and see how it goes. Had those been reversed and someone said debate club a day earlier, my guess is I'd be an attorney or maybe even a politician. As you'll tell from this whole broadcast, I'm pretty good at BS, so I could have been a politician or attorney.
Well, that is just an outstanding story. I'm glad they had a limit of just one club at the high school, and I'm glad you picked the right one.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you being here tonight. You had a great career at AccuWeather and have done a lot of amazing things. I understand you even are a forecaster for the Farmer's Almanac still. Is that still true?
Well, the old Farmer's Almanac, actually, the Farmer's Almanac is this Johnny come lately. It didn't start until like the 1820s, but that's the wrong one. The old Farmer's Almanac is the original. It started back in the 1700s when I was a kid.
Well, I must have the cheap knockoff then. I get it every year in the mail, so I'm ready for 2023.
Yeah, but this was my last year doing their forecasts. I trained some other people to take over from me, but I've been doing them since 1997 or thereabouts. So it's been a while.
That's awesome. So, Jim, I hear that Dr. Louis Ussolini said that he knew all of your kids, but he did not know that they were all your kids. It must be with a sense of pride that you look over this group of distinguished people tonight.
Well, Bill, I look at the crowd that we have here, and there's some more coming on. Never in my wildest dreams did I think back then these kids would go on to be such successful meteorologists and changed the whole world of weather. And when they were in my class, they were kids. You know what I mean? They were kids. I remember Jordan Alpert. Jordan, you with us? Jordan?
I think Jordan can't hear you, Jim. He's looking.
Okay. Jordan came to me one day and said, Mr. Witt, at that time I was Mr. Witt, the Weather Bureau is making a mistake in their formula on the 5-day forecast. If you notice, every fifth day, they have a storm along the East Coast. He probably doesn't even remember this. I said, well, I never noticed that, Jordan. He said, well, they do, and they're making a mistake, and they're putting too much heat in the formula. And he says, someday I'm going to fix that. Oh, I said, that's good, Jordan. That's a good. Here's a kid, though. He's probably then in the 11th grade, and he's going to fix the U.S. Weather Bureau because their formula is wrong. Well, the son of a gun, he did it. He did the GFS model, and that cut out that storm along the coast every 5 days.
So that's amazing, because he did go on to do that and was the chief of the systems development branch at NCEP, which is really cool. Talk about that for a minute, Frank. It's good to have you on the show again. It's been way too long since we had you, and you definitely have the most fabulous hardware in your background there. But talk about some of that early modeling, because that's pretty amazing that you guys got to do that as early as 1967.
Yeah, well, the first time I met Jim was 1964, 65. I actually delivered the newspaper to his house. So one day, I'm interested in science, but one day I walked up to the house, and I wanted a tip or something, but I knocked on the door and I said, what are those white boxes on your front lawn? And so Jim gave me this litany about, the weather instruments in there and everything. And he said, what grade are you? And I said, well, I'm going to be an 8th grader next year. He said, well, come on over to the weather club when you come to Lakeland High. So 65, I started hanging around with Jim. But the memory I have with Jordan and Greg and Jim Hack, who Mike already mentioned, Jordan and Greg were seniors, and they wanted to do a senior project. And so Jordan decided we wanted to invert the Laplacian of the vorticity equation. And so here we are. This is 1968, 67, 68. And, Mike already mentioned we were near Yorktown Heights. And so Jim had made an arrangement with IBM, who was training punch card operators at their facility there, and to get us access to an old IBM computer that had no memory, had no storage. And so Jordan and Greg Jordan worked up the equations to invert the Laplacian. Greg and I wrote the code, and Jim helped us. And we spent a whole semester just going over there in the evening once a week and writing this program and running it on a computer where you put in a deck of cards, Fortran, not Fortran 95 or anything, Fortran before it had a number. And we wrote the code, put it into the computer, the cards into the computer. It would spit back an object deck because it didn't have any memory. Then we put those cards back in and then hope the printer would print out what we wanted. I don't remember how many times we did that. Greg or Jordan might remember, or Jim. But it was a lot of runs. It was a lot of fun, but I learned a lot. Jordan, I think you were using Haltner's book to get the equations, if I remember.
That's right.
And so we had a lot of fun that year. I mean, that was the thing about Jim, in my mind. He gave us not free rein, but he guided us in a way that we were always learning, and enjoying it. It was fun. Jim was, he taught us circuit A, circuit C, how to plot a map, how to make a forecast. And the thing that was amazing was we had all this stuff at the high school. I don't know how Jim did it, but he got it. He even got when the Navy discontinued their hurricane hunting. They had at the time a radar system that they were flying on the hurricane hunters. somehow Jim managed to get the radar at Lakeland High School. I think that's when I fell in love with radar. We had it up on the roof, and I remember we had somebody from the Air Force come and show us how, the Navy or the Air Force come show us how to turn it on and how to use it. But it was that kind of stuff that Jim empowered us to get involved with at high school. I mean, to me, without that, I mean, learning to forecast was great, but it was the way he did it, getting us involved and letting us run with our ideas.
Frank, it's interesting with the radar. I wrote, I don't know how many hundreds of letters to every place asking them if they had a radar. And one day I was teaching class, and somebody came in and said, there's somebody on from Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. I said, okay. So I went in and they said, we have a radar for you. All you have to do is come down here and pick it up. It's free. I said, come down to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. I said, my school can't even get a bus to go to an extra corner. I said, no, that can't be. So I called up some fella in Chicago, and I asked him if there's any help. He was with Air Weather Service, I believe. And they said, well, do you live anywhere near Griffiths Air Force Base? I said, yeah, that's upstate New York. He said, we could ship it there. Oh, I said, that'll be fine. So then I went up to Griffiths Air Force Base when it was shipped there. And I said, do you guys deal with Stewart Airport at all? They said, yeah, we go to Stewart. So I said, oh, who do you talk with? And they gave me the phone number and all that. So when I got home, I called the guy in Stewart and I said, I hear you got a radar that you're going to bring down to you. Yeah. I said, well, listen, instead of dropping it off, why not keep it on the truck and just drive to Lakeland? So one day I'm teaching, and I see 4 Air Force guys knocking on my window, and they said, we have a radar for you. I said, okay. So in they come with this radar and wires all over the floor. I said, now what? They said, now you put it up. I said, what, are you kidding me? I don't know how to do that. So I called that same guy back in Chicago. I said, we got it. Thank you. We don't know how to set it up. So he says, well, here's somebody in Lakehurst, New Jersey, Air Weather Service. Maybe they'll help you out. So I called them and they said, yeah, okay, we'll set it up for you. So they sent a couple of Air Force guys who spent many days and they put the radar set up. And I said, what happens if it breaks? Oh, they said, well, let us check on that. So they came back and they said, we figured it out. We can come once a month to tune it up and fix it. So I said, well, the most important thing, if you do that, then teach the kids how to do it. Okay. So as they were fixing the computer, the kids were watching and put this tube here and that tube there. And after about 3 or 4 months, we didn't need Air Weather Service anymore. They did their own repair of the radar. So that's the little story behind it, Frank. We just dropped the radar off and put it in.
I just remember one day it showed up and we got to play with it, and then these guys were showing us how to put in tubes and change things. It was great. I mean, that's the kind of Jim must have a million stories. I don't know how you got the Circuit A and the Circuit C teletype in Lakeland High School either.
Well, you see, that was the first Circuit A ever to go into a high school, ever. So I had to get licenses for A and then C and then the radar. And that had never been done either. So it was crazy going through the government to get the licenses for A, C, and the radar, which is absolutely nuts. You know how important the radar was? One day we got a phone call from New York City, and they were having a brownout. In other words, it was one of those hot summer days, and they knew we had a radar, and they said, is your radar working? We said, sure. So they said, there are storms out in western Pennsylvania that's heading for New York City, and they look pretty bad. So I said, all right, we'll turn on our set. And they said, how high are the clouds, on the thunderstorms? Well, how the heck do you do that? So I looked up trigonometry, and there's such a thing as Sohcahtoa, Sohcahtoa. We taught the kids how to do that. We knew the distance from the storm. We knew the elevation that we had to put to get the tops of the clouds, so we could figure out the angle. And therefore, the tops of the clouds were 56,000 feet. And that came over New York City, and they had put up the warning based on Lakeland, and the subways were flooded and all kinds of situations. And it was our first real use of the radar system. It was great. I'm done.
So Jim, what did the Weather Bureau think about all this, and were they helpful to you in your efforts?
Bill, you can't believe the Weather Bureau sent up meteorologists all the time. Chief Tony Tancredo, he was the MIC in charge, and he'd bring all his henchmen up. They were just so excited with what these kids were doing. They said it's so professional what they're doing. I think, Mike, you mentioned that at one time you were forecasting at college, and when you went to college, you knew more than even the seniors that had finished 4 years of college.
I actually knew more about how to forecast, and my forecasts were more accurate than almost all of the professors, let alone the students. I mean, it was amazing because the curriculum in college for meteorology is just so much math, calculus, and beyond, and physics. And yet in high school, you managed to explain all those things that use complex math and physics to calculate. You managed to come up with ways to explain them in ways that we could understand without knowing the math or the physics. And that led to an intuitive understanding of what was happening in the atmosphere that just made us so much better as forecasters than we would have been, and really than anyone else.
You see, when I was teaching, I thought if kids would learn how to forecast, that would be more exciting for them than all this other, I don't want to say junk, because it's very important stuff like for Jordan and you guys, but just to be able to forecast was something that grabbed a lot of interest, and that was good stuff. Right, Jordan? You were there.
Right, exactly right. You gave us a lot of freedom.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when I was in graduate school at Penn State, I had a teaching assistantship for about 6 terms. And we had a lab manual and curriculum that frankly bored even me. And the lab I was teaching was for non-scientists, non-meteorology majors, an intro course. And I decided, instead of using this boring manual and teaching them trivial stuff that would be of no interest to them, I decided to pretty much resurrect the high school curriculum that you used and teach them how to forecast the weather, and then hold a forecasting contest within the class where I said, anyone beats me in the contest, they get an automatic A. And
the whole class won.
Well, it did happen once. Out of the 6 classes, about 150 students, I had one beat me eventually.
Hey, Jim, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Mike. No, I got to get back to work. And I'm just so thankful that nobody sang in the last 20 minutes. That was but
now, Mr. G, you weren't a student, but tell how you became attached to the Weather Club.
Well, what's interesting to me is in this whole conversation, I was a teacher, and to answer your question, in search. I always loved weather, and I picked up Weatherwise magazine, and I said, who the hell has a haircut like that? And how much did he pay for it? So I called up.
He was the baseball coach, Mr. G. He was the baseball coach. He had to have a hair.
I said, can I come up and visit? And I walked into the room at Lakeland early in the morning and leaving the Bronx about 5, I guess, to get up there 6:30. And when I walked into that room and I saw Circuit A and Circuit C, guys yelling about rain, snow, and rain, snow line, and Jim yelling, what do you think? And maps all over the board and lit tables. And I'm going, oh my God, what did I just step into? And then around the room was all his lesson plans. So I discreetly stole every single one of them and told Jim, I've got your lesson plans. I teach in the Bronx. I can do this. I know my platform for the children is less because it was impoverished. And Jim and I worked together, and I also got Circuit A and Circuit C without a license, Jim. So I was functioning against the law even then. and then I started, and I saw I was teaching geography. I was giving blank maps from Kansas City. They were putting in states. They were excited to learn capitals. Then they put in rivers. And then after they memorized it, I give a blank map of the United States. They'd have to, before they study the science, they'd have to know every state in the United States and put it in. Then I started teaching them synoptics in France. And I just wanted to share something because it's a longer story, but each one of you guys are just explaining what a great teacher does, because we all had teachers that discounted us and told us what we couldn't do. In my case, I had an English teacher that told my mother that I'll never be able to communicate with people. And if she was alive 20 years ago, I would have sent her a television set. I mean, so this is the great teacher we're talking about. You use the words free, gave us the freedom, gave us the confidence. He did it his own way, which was really interesting. I even get tips now. And what he did was he ignited the best in us, right? So I feel that obligation when I taught. I feel that obligation every single time I go on air or when I did radio. Jim Witt represented the best of people with his giving and thoughtfulness. And I think that's how he encouraged his, I think quietly, that's what swung the classes around to him. Then his enthusiasm and this love of meteorology that he gave to all you guys. And, there was never a harsh word. I mean, I'm guessing now, maybe I'm out of school. There was never a harsh word. There was never a severe criticism. And the seed became the flower, and the flower began to grow, or the seed became the little tree that became the big tree. And I just find that one of the great mysteries of all time. That's why when we did the Weatherwise magazine, I was so happy that the magazine featured you guys, on the cover, because there is no other cover like that anywhere. Nobody. So you guys had the only Jim Witt that existed and will ever exist, because Jim tried to pass it on to another person, and that had a lifespan. Unfortunately, he passed. I tried to pass it on to another person in the Bronx, and that had a lifespan, and that didn't work. So we were all blessed, right? We had the master teacher in front of us all the time.
And so, I know you got to go. I want to say one thing, though. You mentioned something very important. I know Shrub Oak was probably fairly affluent, but you were in the Bronx, in a much lower socioeconomic area, and you were able to bring that interest and that love out of your students.
Well, one of the great stories was the custodian gave my kids, some of which were gang members, the keys to the school to open it up at 6 a.m. Wow. He trusted them so much. And then they would come in, and then all the teachers got upset with me because I'd leave at 1:30. They forgot I got there at 6. But we never had, Jim, one incident out of that weather club. Never once, with all those hours of renegade behavior. Not one. Now, there were times where kids wanted to. I'll tell you one story. I'll leave you with it. But I used to drive an old car, and my kids in the Bronx were embarrassed for me and my Duster. These are poor kids who were embarrassed that I drove a Duster. So one of the kids wanted to open up my car and steal new batteries for me. And I said to him, what are you talking about? He said, look, before the weather club really gets going, before school day begins, I can get a battery for your car. Okay. I said, I have locks on my hood for people like you. He said, don't worry about the lock. I'll take care of that also.
Hey,
Before school ended, I had a new battery. Go ahead.
Hey, Irv, just tell them the transition, how you went from a teacher to television.
Well, I think it's very similar to you guys. I mean, I think every time you had a breakthrough on the computer, whether it was Jordan or any one of you guys, there was a certain degree of enthusiasm and positiveness that you gave off. So they heard about me in the Bronx, and they want to know who the hell is doing this in the Bronx with these kids, which was a Title I school. And CBS came up to watch me teach. And I did my version of whatever I could do with the machines in the background, ANC running, and my maps, and baby Lakeland High School. 3 guys from CBS came in. They came in a limousine, and my students thought it was a hearse. I had to convince them nobody died. Then they came into the room, and I taught, and they came up to me and they said, we just have one question for you. I said, what is it? He said, can you do what you just did in front of a camera? So I said, yes. He said, would you be interested in doing weekends on Channel 2? And I actually was so naive. I said, doing what? And, and there was a conversion somehow between what I did and what they saw and liked. And the bottom line was that, and Jim's heard this story before, so forgive me, Jim, but the bottom line is their attitude was, you're teaching these kids at 5:30 in the morning. Maybe you can get Sadie in the Bronx to stop doing the dishes and watch you. Anything that would work, right? And so they hired me, and it was a journey after that because they wanted to change me. They wanted me to be something I wasn't, but I managed and managed and managed. And Jim and I practically speak every single day for I would say over 50 years. And and I've been following his work, and he's always been ahead of his time, always. So I said to Jim right now, and I probably can say to each one of your disciples, that each one of you can get back into the field, get on the horse and be the happy warrior and ride again. And I bet you Jim could be the same great science administrator and weather teacher if he wanted to. It's just a fascinating life having Jim Witt in your life.
Thank you, Irv.
Irv, we're so glad you were able to join us. It's just quite an honor.
Irv.
Do you need to run?
Irv, how many years you on TV?
This is going to be my 45th year. Hey, wait. I think you guys are like this. I've had 27 bosses. News directors, 9 general managers, and each one of them never asked me a question, and guess who's left standing? Ta-da! Right, thanks for inviting me, guys.
Thanks so much for joining
us. Have fun
us
tonight, Irv, on TV.
All right, bye-bye.
So Carl Silverman, you retired as a lead forecaster in the Space Flight Meteorology Group at Johnson Space Center. Talk about, the big part of the club in terms of learning to work together and to communicate ideas, and how that's helped your career.
Well, the most interesting thing as mentioned earlier is Mr. Witt, Jim.
Oh boy.
Having trouble with
you might want to turn your video off. I think we have some restricted bandwidth.
To learn what we wanted to learn and move forward. And the most important.
I want to squeeze it out.
I think he's gone. He's got a 300 baud modem.
Carl, why don't you go out and join us back? Maybe you'll catch a wave of bandwidth
Hello.
there, and then we'll come back to you as soon as we get you back. So Jim, I've heard all this talk about Service A and Service C. I mean, we're talking teletypes here.
That's right.
Yeah, talk about what got you interested in making the Weather Club happen.
Oh, way back when I was a youngster, there was a rather wild hurricane in 1944 that came right through Long Island. And I lived on the top of a hill in Queens. And well, the water was actually sloshing through the walls. And I had fish tanks, and the house was swaying such that the water was coming out of the fish tanks, flowing one side to the other. And I thought, boy, this is pretty exciting. And the next morning I got up and there were trees down everywhere. And I thought, wow, weather is pretty good. So from that time on, I was always interested in the weather. And that was kind of fun for me. And I always looked at weather as being fun. And I do a lot of research, as my students know. Like today, I probably spent 7 hours on research. In addition to trying to call some people about the show tonight, and therefore, get them all listening here. Anyway, that's how I just excited with weather. I talk to Irv every day. There's no question about that. We talk over weather and other things, family and whatnot. And I just go about doing my thing. I do broadcasts every day. I do 10 broadcasts a week on WKIT, which is in Bangor, Maine. I do that because the owner of the station is Stephen King, the Stephen King, and he's a great guy. We get along real well, and he treats me good. And then I do another, and I've finished 47 years on WKIT. And I also would do a station in Shrub Oak, well, it's in Peekskill. It's called WHUD for the Hudson Valley, #1. And I finished my 50th year last February on WHUD. See, the contract I have with WHUD is they have to keep me until I get a forecast right.
It's funny, I had never heard of Stewart International Airport until we were planning to fly up for a wedding in Cooperstown, and I learned about this airport there, Stewart, and that was a really good gateway to get to the Hudson Valley. So that was interesting. I probably would have never thought about Stewart International Airport if I hadn't looked it up last week coming for our wedding.
So Bill, can I add I have a little story. You mentioned the award Jim got in 2011. Greg Tripoli and I happened to be blessed to be there when Jim got the award. And to me, that was one of the finest moments I've ever had as a meteorologist, was to be there with Jim to celebrate him getting that award. It's true, Mike and all of us wrote these letters, and it was actually Louis Uccellini's idea and instigated that because Jordan and Louis used to carpool. And so Jordan told Louis about Jim. And then Jim used to go to these winter storm conferences in Connecticut every year, and Louis was invited. And after hearing all the stories about him, he went to this meeting and Jim was there. And he said, "Are you the Jim Witt who taught at Lakeland High School?" And of course, Jim and he went off and on about it. Louis came back from that meeting and he contacted all of us and said, "We need to make an award for this guy. This guy is incredible." And so we were blessed. Mike, led the charge. We got the award for Jim, which was very well deserved. And I know I don't want to speak for Greg, but to just be there with Jim when he got the award in Seattle, no less, it was fantastic.
As an aside, Greg was honored to speak at Columbia University, right, Greg? Was it last year or the year before? And I figured, gee, if Greg is going to be down there speaking, I'm going to go down there and get a chance to see him. So I started with my wife. We went down. Irv was there. Mr. G went, and of course I got stuck in traffic. What's new in New York? And well, I got there late. But I walk in the back of the auditorium, and Greg is speaking to this auditorium of people, and all of a sudden he says, "Hey, there's my science teacher." He yells it out from the stage. You remember that, Greg?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, well, the things that are kind of crazy. Oh boy.
And of course, Greg, you went on to become the chair of the Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences Department at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is amazing. So tell us about how this time in the Weather Club and your time with Mr. Witt helped prepare you for the amazing things you've accomplished.
Well, it was a funny thing for me because I was interested a lot in weather before I ever saw the Weather Club. I came from a family, railroad family, working for New York Central Railroad in Cleveland. And there in Cleveland, as a kid, I used to go fishing in Lake Erie, by myself. I guess in those days, parents let kids do a lot more than they do now. But back in those days, I used to travel like 10 miles back when I was 10 years old to a fishing pier and go fishing in Lake Erie. And I was really interested in the weather and how it was going to affect me. And so I really got into watching the weather on television. And in Ohio, they require you to write a career book on what you're going to do for the rest of your life when you're in the 9th grade. And I know a lot of places don't do that, but they did that there because they wanted people to get focused on something and think about your future. So at that point, I was really interested in science all around, and I had done a number of things. In my little laboratory in the basement, with the chemistry and the whole thing. But I really was into meteorology at the time. And so I wrote this career book all about meteorology, and I researched the whole thing out and how much money they make. And my father was extremely upset that I wanted to go into meteorology because they don't make any money at all. And at least they didn't at that time. And so, I was pretty intent on it. And then turned out my father got promoted to had to go to Croton, where he had a new job as a supervisor of that plant, or that repair area there in Croton, where they fixed the, at the time it was New York Central trains. And so we moved to Peekskill, or Shrub Oak, right in that neighborhood, right next to Lakeland High School. And I went to high school there. And one day I was walking down the hall and I see all these people drawing weather maps in a room. I go, what the hell? I'm supposed to be the one who wants to be a meteorologist, and all these people are in there working on weather maps and things. And I thought, wow, this is great. And I just went in there and immediately started interacting with people and got involved right away. And I was, I had this really high interest before I was ever in there. Now, this is when I was in the 10th grade. I think it was in March of, it would have been 66. And so I immediately started learning about, weather maps, and they had a system in the Weather Club there where the people coming in had to learn how to read the teletypes and learn how to plot data, and you could work your way up to when you could analyze maps. And so I started on the track and I worked my way up. And I think by the time fall came along and I was in the 11th grade, I could do the analysis, and I was really getting into the whole thing. And Jordan was there, and Jordan was kind of like my mentor. And Jordan showed me a lot about some of the research he was doing. I think he had a summer job or something in NYU, or was it somewhere there, right? In New York, Jordan. And you had all the United Airlines manuals about how upper air and how to use upper air and all these things. And we really got into looking at this and trying to figure out how upper air would affect the surface and and so on. And so I was always into doing novel things that nobody else thought about. So I thought it was really cool that we had this upper air, and we were trying to think of things to do with the upper air. You know, we didn't have meteorology textbooks at the time or anything like that. We were just freelancing it and trying to look at these maps, look at the United Airlines guidance that they had, and make sense of it. And we came up with a number of different things that seemed pretty interesting, like 850 millibars, how to use 850 millibar changes in temperature to forecast surface changes in temperature. We called it temperature extrapolation. And we were, extrapolating what the temperature would be based on what the 850 millibar temperature was. In the meantime, I had been analyzing these maps every day, the surface map, which was extremely fun because, the surface maps, you get to put the fronts on there and draw the lines, and you really learn how to draw these maps in a way that obeys the data but still looks artistic.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I mean, because the weather isn't as goofy as the way it would come out if you just drew the map without understanding a little bit about the weather. So I got better and better at this. And in fact, up until last year, I taught people for years and years about how to draw maps, and I would always require them in my senior level classes at Wisconsin here, even up until a couple of years ago when I was teaching it. They still had to draw maps by hand, because I think drawing maps by hand triggers something in your brain to understand what you're doing. You really get a feel for the flow of the weather and what's happening underneath, so that you can physically see it. And what I would do with students is I try to reproduce that by having them draw these maps. I give them a map, and I knew what the map was supposed to look like, but they'd bring it to me, and then I'd have them defend their analysis. And I really got into this, where you have to defend exactly every single line and every single little closed contour you put in there. You have to defend why you think that was there. And that's the way we were taught meteorology. But what it does is it gives you an intuition, an understanding of the flow of the fluid, and I thought this was really important for teaching students to really understand it, because you can learn all the equations, and you can learn vorticity, advection, thermodynamics. You can understand all this stuff, but if you can't see that on a weather map, you're not there. And so I always felt, and I think students come back years later and tell me this, that this is where they grow up as meteorologists, working on a map. And I think I had the opportunity in high school to do that at high school, and to learn and understand the flow and the fluidicity of weather. And throughout my career, I've always relied on it. Now, by the time I was a senior in high school, Jim really set this up so we could use computers. And we always want to do something really innovative. And we had this, I don't know how you did that, Jim, but you had the people from Florida State come.
Yeah.
And show us things. And, that's why I went to Florida State later on. They kind of were recruiting us. But Harvey Mogul was one guy that came and helped us out. And he showed us in our advanced meteorology class, he was showing us about vorticity advection, and that you could do that there was such thing as a barotropic model where you could automatically compute vorticity advection, where that would show you where the weather systems are moving. So we thought it would be really fun to try to be able to do that, but we didn't know anything about programming. I don't think Jim knew anything, but you set us up.
Yep.
At, where was that?
Well, you remember, Greg, even Jimmy Hack in the 9th grade with you guys printed out a barotropic model at that time.
Yeah.
You actually did a barotropic model.
Yeah, we were hand analyzing those things every day. We thought there must be a way to do this automatically. And so we wanted to figure out a way to automate it. When we saw Harvey Mogul come in with telling us about these equations and how you could apply this and calculate things from this. One of the things that you can't do very well by drawing maps is forecasts. And there are graphical ways you can do some of that, but in order to get a forecast of a map, you have to be able to move it with some kind of a model. And what we would do at the time in the high school is we'd look at the maps and look at how they've been trending and then try to guess what they would be the following day.
Remember, Greg, we had the light table.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we can look at
Yeah,
changes from day to day on the light table and then extrapolate those changes.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, Greg, Jim taught us synoptic meteorology, which is kind of a dying, part of our field right now. I mean, it was always, what does the map show you? And I think, it's a shame that universities aren't doing as much synoptic. Everybody wants to run a Python program and do an analysis. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you don't get into the actual basics and feel it, by having to plot a map and analyze it and understand what it means,
we once had a class, or not a class, but like people teaching us on how to teach. And one of the things these kind of psychiatrists or people who understand how the human mind works is that you learn with your hands through movement with your hands and drawing things, set up special pathways in your brain that leave an imprint. And I found that to be true with analyzing weather maps. That when you analyze a weather map, there's no substitute. You can look at weather maps all day long. You don't pick up that other dimension of seeing the things underneath. By trying to draw contours so that you don't draw a bullseye around every station, but you see the relationship between stations. That teaches you, and drawing that teaches you something that you can't replace by reading textbooks and things.
Greg, I remember I used to see vorticity coming around the bottom of a trough, and I would be standing there and pushing, knowing that it's going to trigger a storm off the Carolinas, and you kind of, you're moving it with your arms and whatever. That's what I wanted to teach. And another thing that I like to mention, if you remember in the weather club, like you said, you go through stages. First, you learn how to plot, and then you do this, and then you do that. If you remember, and you probably never realized this, I said, you don't really know this until you can teach somebody else it.
Was that where I got that?
Right?
I said that before too. I don't remember who told me that.
I told you got to be able to teach it. And once you teach it, then you know it.
Yeah. Teaching it does add a lot to what you know, because you have to understand it to explain it.
So Jordan Albert, I guess that mentoring was a critical component of the club.
The club did do that sort of thing. We worked hard, and a lot of the times we would, we didn't harass the young freshmen very much, actually. Jim Hack was that freshman. But I'll add,
and he's better for it, Jordan. He's better for it.
Yeah.
Well, he actually completed the barotropic model that I and others and Greg started.
Yep.
It was Jim's ability to get us that summer internship with Jerome Spar's program.
Oh, Dr. Spar, yeah. Yep.
And so I think Chris Ortega were there.
Yep.
And I was gopher for Joe Bocelli and another master's student. They were both working on their masters. And the banter there was all about meteorology. And they essentially taught us a little bit of mathematics. We learned what a delta was. We learned what a differential equation was. And as soon as I saw that, I had this dilemma between, is the world deterministic, or can you predict everything with Newton's law? Because we were taking physics at the time. And, I guess we were kind of a nerdy idea, but that was important to us. And that was part of discussion in and out of the Weather Club. People taught about that. Was the alternative was supernatural things versus science. And when I saw the idea that one could write a vorticity equation and move the delta T over, make a finite difference equation, I just couldn't wait. We went back, and the first person I think I told was Greg. And I said, look at this. And we realized we could make our own model. And at the same time, Jim, you did it again. You got us 5 hours of BOSI IBM computer time a month.
Yeah.
And we used a QuickTran computer, which was Fortran as an operating system.
Yeah.
Since JCL and all that stuff, I don't think existed yet. But they had a typewriter. You know, the future was going to be terminals, and they had one set up at IBM, and we used to hitchhike out there and handle that computer and type in the values. Our analysis was acetate sheet. We would have marks on it, and we would copy off the values from the height field and the winds, and we would integrate a vorticity equation. None of us knew how to back the Laplacian. That's what Jim Hack figured out years later. And so
we were able to figure out where things were going to move.
Right, following the idea that Greg had, you know, looking at the synoptic idea, we had seen so many advections of these small storms and troughs. We always used a 700 millibar wind to advect the system, because we really couldn't do the nonlinear part, which was V dot del zeta, if zeta is a vorticity, and we couldn't do that, compute that, because we didn't know how to go backwards and solve the Laplacian. We were just kids. But we knew that we could use a 700 millibar wind to advect the vorticity centers. And we did just that. We advected the whole vorticity from usually from west to east because of the prevailing winds at those levels. And so the Rocky Mountains in California kind of fell into the sea. But the East Coast was fine. And we were able to follow the vorticity and predict with parallelograms of vorticity in the 700 millibar height as to how much precipitation would occur. And after that was a temperature prediction, and we could come up with the amount of snowfall and when it would start.
You know, Jordan,
that's what we did.
I was thinking way back, there was a storm that was heading in our direction. And I won't mention his name, but a very famous and longtime weatherman on New York television called me and said, what does the Weather Club think about tomorrow's storm? So I said, well, I was just in there with him. The trough is advancing. The upper air winds are from the southwest. We feel that with the advancing trough, if you take the vector of the movement, it'll push the storm out to sea. So he says, so you're not calling for a big storm? I said, no, we think it'll miss us. He said, see, that's where you should have computers, because we're going to get bombed tomorrow by that storm. And I said, oh, well, we don't have computers here. You know, we're just kind of, we're just new kids. Anyway, the storm went out to sea. We never got a snowflake. Never got a phone call from him, but it was interesting. Hey, I do want to mention something. I look on the arrows, and I would like to introduce the first meteorology student from Lakeland, and it's Doug Foley. Doug, you're right now muted. Why don't you introduce yourself? Here's our very first meteorologist from Lakeland. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, hi. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing well. When I see all these, I have to mention, you guys really changed. You look different when you were in high school.
Yeah, yeah. Your flat top is a little.
Well, I left part of it in the other room. That's why.
Right.
I used to have it brown. Now it's, I painted it white. Yeah. But
yeah,
Doug, you went on to be a meteorologist, our first one.
Yeah, I had you for science in high school, first year there, and then I recall that class was about maybe 7 months on weather, and the other 2 months on geography, geology, and
astronomy.
the rest of her science.
Uh-oh, you're letting my secret out now. You're letting my secret out.
So I got really interested in the weather part of it, and I think you started the weather club the following year.
Uh-huh.
And so I was in it for the 3 years before I graduated in '66. And so, I wanted to be a meteorologist. I went off to University of Utah and got a BS in meteorology and then later an MS in meteorology. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a job in forecasting. At the time, the places that I was looking at, they had hiring freezes on, and you couldn't get a job as a forecaster. So I ended up getting into environmental consulting, and so I spent my career not doing professional weather forecasts, but in doing air quality diffusion modeling, air quality impact analysis, and then ultimately the whole environmental science deal. And so I got a certified consulting meteorologist certification and continued to do that kind of stuff for most of my career in as an environmental consultant. And then later on, I joined a power company to handle their environmental department, spent another 20 years doing that.
Wow. You were vice president, right?
Now I'm retired.
Yeah.
But I got a weather station in my backyard.
See that? You see, Doug is from Georgia, and you can see the background, the mountains from Georgia, how pretty they are.
Yeah, but I never forget you. It was quite a time we had.
Oh my God.
Of the weather club.
It was certainly
before you had the radar.
Oh yeah.
That came the year after I left.
Oh my gosh. Hey, Carl Silverman, do you think your voice thing is fixed now? Carl?
No, I think he's frozen.
No.
And I had two more questions I wanted to ask Carl.
I don't know. You have to.
But now Carl was an early achiever, wasn't he, Jim?
Yes, Carl came into the weather club when he was in the 8th grade. All right. He begged and screamed and kicked, laid on the floor until I finally let him in as an 8th grader. He eventually became the lead forecaster in meteorology. It was out in one of the Midwestern states. And then he got that call from NASA, would you come down and be in our weather service for making the forecasts for the rockets. And so he taught a lot of the astronauts about weather and so forth. And he was the lead forecaster on many of the launches. And some of them were really hair-raising because it was like 15 minutes. They had to get the rocket down, or there was a thunderstorm in the way. And that's why I feel badly that Carl can't tell the story. Because Donna, who when I would teach, what was it, Monster Storms? It was
Monster
called?
Storms, yes.
Donna had this program at BOCES, Monster Storms, and I would, baffle the kids with all kinds of junk, and then Donna would have my students come in and talk to the kids, and we would use Jordan's model to teach them how to forecast. And go ahead, Donna, you go on.
Absolutely. Well, let me just share one story since Carl can't seem to join us with his audio. He actually started in 5th grade. His teacher allowed him to set up a weather station outside of their school.
Yeah.
And he worked with the custodial staff, and every day he gave the weather reports to his whole school.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. And so that same BOCES that you guys have been talking about, fast forward about 14, 15 years, I came to BOCES as the director of the Center for Environmental Education and ran a program called the Jason Project. And when that ended, the teachers still wanted to do something similar. So I called Jim and said, hey, would you come on over and teach some meteorology class as part of this full day program? And that grew and evolved we actually ended up calling it the Jim and Dorna Show, because it was part education, part comedy routine. But we educated so many young people and their teachers. We would bring up Jordan's GFS weather model, and it was great because it took place usually in March, and in New York State, March seems to be the time when we get those big storms. And when a big storm was coming, boy, the kids were excited, and we'd pull up that weather model and let them do the forecasting. Jim, after doing introduction.
Mike would take you out to, you went to AccuWeather Studios, right?
Well, when I first asked you to do this, we wanted to bring in other people in the field, because that was the model of the Jason project. And he said, sure, call my students. They didn't know me at all. And I got immediate responses. Absolutely anything for Jim. And over the years, I would just call them. Absolutely, I'm on there. I'm there for you, Dorna. We would do 10 to 15 minutes at the end. But then Mike invited me out to AccuWeather, and Frank invited me down to his facilities. And then later on, with some students I was bringing down for a marine ecology program, invited them over. And all the material I got from you guys, I brought back, shared with the teachers, shared with the kids. So it was
worked out real well.
It really did. And, we did so much work with these young people. Who knows? We're talking about the inspiration that you gave these students, but who knows who we inspired in the next generation with the program that we did together, Jim.
Yeah, that was good. I was going to say something else. You did go down to Frank's. You didn't go in a hurricane hunter plane yet to fly into a storm. Frank, are you there yet?
Jim, I've been waiting for you to come with me anytime.
I know
you and Dorna have always been welcome.
You invited me many times to go on the Hurricane Hunter and go into a Category 5, and I
live in a tropical storm if you want.
Well, no, I always beat around the bush, right? I couldn't come up with a decision, could I?
He wants the equivalent of that 1944 hurricane again, the one that removed some rivets from one of the.
Jim, you can ask Greg Tripoli what it's like, Jim, because Greg got my seat in Rita. I gave it to Greg so he could have his event.
I'd leave part of me in the Hurricane Hunter plane when I would get out, Frank. If you got my drift.
Carl, can you hear us now? Because I see you blinking, and that's a good sign.
I could hear him now.
There we go.
Hey, okay. Carl.
Well, Carl, I shared your story from 5th grade.
They've all been talking about you for the better part of an hour here, Carl. So you weren't here to defend yourself. But I guess you must have been interested in all the space launches and the programs at NASA as a kid. And then it had to be like a dream come true to get to do it from the Space Flight Meteorology Group.
Yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, in my junior year, somebody wrote in my yearbook that someday I was going to work at NASA. And sure enough, I was. And I can't get my video to come back up here, so I'm
perfect.
Sorry.
Well, we see you fine, so you don't.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, this is a marvelous technology, these computers, but they just don't want to work when you feel like it. But earlier, somebody asked about working at NASA and how the Weather Club prepared me. And I have to say the most important thing was to be able to communicate the information about the weather in simple, plain language so that management and the flight director and flight controllers understood exactly what the weather was going to be for launch, any chance of aborts, and especially end of mission landings. So being able to do that in front of a class and now doing it in front of the head of the space program, that's what prepared me for it.
Great.
That's just amazing. Now, Dorna was telling us that you started out early in the 5th grade in your school and begged to be in the Weather Club early. So talk about how you convinced Mr. Witt to let you in.
Well, an older student had been in the Weather Club the year before and told me about it. And I did, starting in 5th grade, have a weather box where I would give the temperature, read the temperature and wind direction and speed. And Mr. Corwin, the principal, would announce it over the PA system. And so when when this fellow told me about the Weather Club, I went to Mr. Witt, and as he said, I literally begged to get in early. And he actually was brave enough to not only let me in, but gave me the keys to the back door to the old high school, which then was our middle school or junior high school. And I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go in there and start plotting maps and analyzing maps. And my mother said I was Mr. Witt's assistant half-wit.
I'm going to lower your earth science grade.
And it was fascinating to learn this, as was mentioned earlier, plotting maps by hand. I did that even working in mission control, because there's something about physically plotting the information, analyzing it in your brain, and seeing how things are moving hour by hour. And when you're trying to land a $1 billion shuttle with all those souls on board, you don't want to make a mistake. So everything I did was by hand.
You know, when you plot a map, you're thinking about the weather on every piece of weather you put onto that map. You're thinking about what's happening. So plotting a weather map, when there's a hurricane or something like that, I still plot a weather map. I had to make a very important decision one time. It was IBM. They said, we're going to close down the whole Hudson Valley because there's a hurricane coming up the coast. And they said, do you think we're making the right decision? I said, well, give me about 10 minutes. Let me work it out. And I plotted the upstream weather. My guys would know what I'm talking about when I say upstream weather. And all the heavy winds were to the east of the storm. And all along the coast, the winds were 10, 15 miles an hour. I said, keep everybody. Don't let them go home. And they did. I said, but in Connecticut, send them home. Because they were on the eastern side, and as the storm went up through Long Island, Connecticut got it. And by God, we never got a wind over 15 miles an hour. So when you plot the upstream, you learn weather. End of my story.
And you're muted, Frank, so unmute yourself.
Jim, there's a question I've always had.
Yep.
How did you get weather to be into the New York State Regents exam for Earth Science?
I wrote it. I wrote the questions. They asked me to come to Albany and write the questions for the Regents. Remember Roger Ming came to Lakeland? He was the head of the Earth Science, and he was so dumbfounded by what he found at Lakeland. He said, would you come to Albany and write our questions? That's how
just for background, the New York State Regents exams were, if you got a passing grade in those, you got into the New York State University system pretty much, without having to take the credits. And so we all took these exams for each of the sciences and math and English and history. And somehow Jim got the weather into one of those big exams for Earth Science.
Yeah.
Of course, we all took that exam because we wanted to do well, but...
Well, it was interesting because when I first started teaching, the principal, Mr. Lindsay at the time, called me down to the office and he said, Mr. Witt, come the spring and summer, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I said, why is that? He said, because I'm going through your exam, your report cards, and a lot of these kids are getting 90s and even a couple of hundreds. Their marks are so high. He said, the Earth Science Regents, more than half the kids in the state fail that exam, and you're giving these kids 90s. And when they take the exam and fail, mom and dad are going to be really upset. I said, I think they know what they're doing. I'm game on it. And every kid passed the Regents, and probably 70% of them got over 90. What did you get on the Earth Science Regents, Frank? Do you remember? Probably
it was over 90. I know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Jordan, what about you? You get over 30?
I don't. I never took Earth Science from you.
Oh, that's right.
Jim.
You
I
weren't
came
in my
grade,
class.
But
no, they only
wasn't-
want.
I was
they
in
only
90s on the Regents in physics.
Yeah, they only wanted smart kids in my class. That's what it was. Yeah, you.
I never took the Regents in earth science either.
So Jim, there had to eventually be a waiting list for, I mean, because you couldn't take everybody, could you?
No, we had, there would be about 6 or 7 kids each class. They would, they have different study halls, different lunch periods and so forth. So every period it would change. 6 or 8 kids would go out, 6 or 8 kids would come in. And the secret was these kids had to be able to teach the other kids how to do it. And if a kid fooled around in the weather club, he was history, because there was always somebody to take his place. And so they knew it was serious business. They were there to work, and it worked on its own. I really didn't have to be there.
Now, and let me tell the story. When I was a senior, I was kind of the lead among the students in the weather club.
Right.
And the way a typical day would go was this. I'd leave my house at 4:30 a.m. and my parents let me use that in 1966 Buick Electra. And I would drive around and pick up other key people from the weather club. There'd be 6 of us in the car. We'd get to the school about 5:10 or so a.m. or so. Now, you had given me a key to the front door of the high school.
Same as Carl, right?
Right. We were able to go in. I had a key to the weather room. We were able to go in.
Right.
And at 5:10, the 6 of us would go into the weather room and we'd pull all the data off the teletype that had come in overnight. And we'd plot up the maps together, the surface map, the upper air maps. We'd plot and analyze them. We'd put together the forecast for the local newspaper.
Right.
And for the radio station. And then we'd do the actual radio broadcasts. And we'd post it for the high school and wherever the forecast board was. And by the time we finished all of this, it was about 7:55 a.m., which was the start of the regular school day. Right. So we did all that in the hours before school started.
Yep.
And in fact, kind of interesting because that year, my first period class was gym. And it wasn't named after you, by the way.
No, they spelled it wrong.
But I wasn't all that anxious to go. I was more of a nerd than a jock, let's say. And so sometimes if we were a little bit behind in the forecasts, I would cut gym in order to finish them. And after a while, I found out, you have to go to detention for cutting gym class, and lo and behold, it was an in-school detention first period, which meant that the punishment for missing gym class was I had to miss more gym class. So that didn't bother me at all. But then the rest of the day, all of our study halls, lunch, whatever, we'd all be in the weather room updating the forecast. We had the midday radio forecast. We had the late afternoon radio forecasts. And then pretty much the group of us, we had a core. This was like a year or two after most of the folks in this broadcast graduated. So we had mostly a little different group. But we were pretty much together in everything we did, probably 50 hours or more a week.
Isn't that amazing?
I mean, on weekends, we would all get together at someone's house, whatever.
Mike, I have to think about when you were at, with AccuWeather, the numbers of people that you transmitted this weather to had to be millions and millions and millions of people.
It's actually billions and billions and billions of people.
All right, so I don't know the difference between an M and a B.
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of interesting because AccuWeather's digital media, the website, the mobile apps, and all that sort of stuff that people can get on their smartphones or their PCs or whatever around the world, every single day, something like 2.5 billion people access those things and get their weather.
And Mike, you put that up.
Well, originally I was in charge of the website, but people have gone way beyond me. But the thing that I did was I came up with the idea that, you know what? so much of weather forecasting is based on those models that folks like Greg and Jordan and everyone were developing. And every year the models get better and better and better. And at some point, it's going to get to the point where they're better than even the best forecasters can do forecasting the way we learned. And as we approached that point, I started doing some studies to see, well, how can we generate forecasts automatically from the models that are more accurate than the best forecasters can produce? And I found a way to do that was by combining the models in different ways, because there were different models that had different strengths and weaknesses. And by combining the forecast data from the models and then using intelligent algorithms, artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like that, you could automatically generate forecasts that were better than anyone could ever do by themselves, no matter what, better than any person. And sure, every once in a while, a person could beat what we came up with, but very rarely. And when you go on AccuWeather's website or mobile app or whatever, everything you see there is created automatically. Even the plain language forecast. You'll see a forecast that says dense fog will break midday today with early afternoon sunshine giving way to building clouds, and thunderstorms will move through the area between 5 and 8 p.m. Some may bring heavy downpours, gusty winds, and even hail. All of that wording can be generated automatically. And it's done not just in English, but in Canadian English, English, in addition to what we speak, and in about 80 other languages for all around the world, which is amazing. And we do still have people look at it all the time and add any accuracy where they can. But all of our studies show that basically, if you can develop the right algorithms the right way, they'll beat us, which is kind of disheartening for me, because I thought it's the best. But
well, you know, I look at what's going on tonight, and these fellas, my students, they don't know what they've done for me in life. I am so proud of you guys and what Donna did to put it together, and with the monster storms and all that. You just have no idea. It has made my life, seeing what you guys have done from what you learned at Lakeland. You have changed the world of weather. We would never be where we are. Like Carl, we learned so much from the space agency with all the satellites and so forth. Jordan with his computer model, Mike with telling people, Frank, what he's done with the Hurricane Center. My God, they're within 2 miles of knowing where the eye of the storm is going to hit. I mean, this is so incredible. And I feel, when I think back, if I didn't teach these kids, they probably would not have gone into meteorology, and we would not be where we are today, if not the fact that I went into teaching. I was going to be a ball player with the Yankees, and I gave that up to teach because that's what I really wanted to do. Is that crazy?
Yeah, we all thank you, and so do the Yankees. I think before we leave, we should all give a round of applause, because the way you have not only helped shape our lives and make them better, but you've made the lives for billions of people all around the world better through the inspiration and opportunities you gave everyone. And that's just truly amazing. So I'm gonna.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're here.
Oh yeah. Well, I know our time is probably running close to end. So
Bill, you said at the beginning that I had to cut the article down, and it went from over 10,000 words to 3,500 words. And what made me the saddest part for me was one of the questions I asked when I was interviewing everybody was advice for budding meteorologists. And it's so sad because there was so much wisdom that these guys had to share. So maybe that's a future article coming.
Well, do this, Dorna. James has turned on screen sharing. I want some of our regular panelists to get to ask everyone something too. But show the PowerPoint that you sent over that's so cool with all the pictures, especially of all the members that are here. If you can pull that up, if that's not too much.
Yeah, I have it pulled up. If you just want to give me a second. And this is, I've sort of become the archive for, let me do a share here.
So who are all these handsome guys in this picture right here? Because that had to be quite a boost to your social standing at the high school there when that came out.
Yeah, I see a lot of the kids I knew. One of the twins there. Yeah, I see them. And Hawkins, that is, putting the latest forecast up on the board. Yeah. So yeah.
Ironically, the gentleman, the young man on the right, worked.
Oh, that's Neary.
Kevin Neary, yes.
Yeah.
He worked with me at BOCES, yes.
Yeah.
So that was the original article, and then
Danny Kiskis, I see there. I mean, these are kids from the 60s. Yep.
Yeah. And
Dr.
as you
Coco
mentioned,
McLean, would you have been in heaven to have had this when you were in school?
Oh yeah, no, that's pretty much what I've been thinking this entire time. I didn't get something like this. And I mean, even when I went to college, I didn't have something quite like this. It would have been amazing. I was just kind of this like lone isolated island of weather geekery, and I was embraced by other nerds. I hung out with the chess club people and all of that, but it's not the same. It's not the same as having a teacher who works to bring a radar from all the way across the country and gets other people to do it for him, never paying, as far as I could tell, a dime to get it done, by the way, and just brings you all these amazing opportunity after opportunity, pulls you all together to do all of this. I mean, it's amazing.
You look at the first weather room. That was comfortably sit about 3 people. And they finally gave me a full room. But this kid who's plotting the map right in front of us, that's Chris Ortega. And believe it or not, when I left teaching, he took over my earth science classes.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that incredible? And there's the radar back here. And that's Paul Leo looking at the radar.
My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it. Any more, Donna?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's lots. And then there's the big room.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. I wanted to say to Kim, the ability of having all of us who are relatively socially awkward at this age and into science and a little bit nerdy, watching Star Trek on Friday nights instead of going out and that type of stuff. At least we could link together socially in the weather club and share our experiences and not feel so awkward.
Well, I have to imagine all the other kids in school just thought the world of what y'all were doing.
Yeah, here's our radar.
Wow.
Yeah, that's on the roof of the high school, by the way.
Can you imagine?
Did y'all just run an extension cord up there to it? How did you power it?
Well, these guys, I tell you, when we turned it on, the lights in the school dimmed.
Auxiliary nuclear power.
Not only that, the funny thing was that after a while of us using the radar, Mr. Lindsay came in and told Mr. Witt, and I was standing there. He says, "You guys can't be running this thing all the time. Our electric bill has gone through the roof. Only turn it on when there's thunderstorms."
I said, sure. Then we turned it on again.
Yeah.
Keep going, Donna. This is great.
There's the light table.
Oh, see, that's the light table I talked about. That's Earl Vanderbilt. I can tell it by the back of his head. We put yesterday's map underneath the new map, and we can see how it's moving. Yep.
And there we go again.
Oh, Phyllis. Yep. Oh my gosh, there they are. They're there. See, one guy teaching the other person how to do it. That was the essence of the club. You teach it, then you know it. Go ahead, Donna.
And there's the weather board you talked about.
Oh yeah. And there I am teaching a class. And I always like to look at this and see how the kids are. Look at every eye is on what I'm doing. Every eye. Because they were having fun doing that.
Mr. Witt, you made the mistake one time of having me teach the pseudo adiabatic chart. You had to go to Washington. And you
That
didn't
was
know-
not a mistake, Carl. You did a great job. I know
Yeah.
about that.
Except you didn't realize that I was shade blind, and everybody kept correcting me when I was trying to teach them
Green
how to
and red.
do between green and light green and yellow, and they gave me a lot of grief. But I was trying to teach them how to come up with the convective condensation level.
Uh-huh.
They would make fun of me because I would have the wrong color when I would talk to this line or that line.
Now
So-
think of this, Carl. You were doing this in high school. Is that
That's
crazy?
right.
The dry and
taught-
wet adiabatic levels and
And I went on, and senior year of college, I ended up teaching an astronomy class and a meteorology class to graduating education students because they were short credits.
Uh-huh. Here's there's
New
my
York Times article.
crew cup there. Yeah, see now here's Jordan. He's teaching this kid about how to do the radar. You see this fella, he's
yeah.
around, and this
Yeah.
is in about 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 kids in there. There's some other kids over in this corner on the far right. Yeah, okay. Look at that, 1967, January 7th. We took up the whole page of the New York Times.
Now, how do you score 85% in forecasting weather?
You make mistakes 15% of the time.
Okay. Okay. Forecast verification then. I got you.
Here's Jordan. He's showing these kids about this, that, and the other thing, and I'm looking at it and I'm learning too. And what we didn't mention in the other high school that I was chairman at in Lakeland, I had 4 schools. We had television too. I taught the kids TV. Here they're setting up a board, and so they did radio and TV, which was good.
You kind of had the Neil Frank haircut there, Jim.
Yeah. And this is Jorg Cowan's child. What we did was we got a lot of these kids scholarships. You can see this youngster is very well. He's dead. He died not long after this. But I hired him at Fleet Weather, which is the weather company I owned, and I literally had to carry him around from one station to another because he couldn't walk after a while. So that was Jorg. What a good kid he was. Any more?
Oh yeah, look who's.
Oh, look at he's doing the broadcast. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
On the air.
Yep.
Oh, geez, here's part of the weather club.
I don't know what year that was.
Oh, well, this is Kenny Wolfe. Oh my God, that goes way. Here's Jordan. I see Jordan there. I don't know if I see any more. I see a lot of kids that were in the class. Him and
That looks like it's maybe 68.
Yeah, no, it was earlier than that because I see.
67?
Yeah, it was maybe 66 or 67. Yeah. Wow, look at that. Holy mackerel. That was
Notice the diversity too. We were a
Mhm.
good mixture of the diversity that was available in Lakeland High area.
Yeah. See, here's Roger Ming. He was the director
it's
of
Roger
Earth
Ming.
Science. And I was showing him circuit A. This was which was A? This was A and this was C, I believe. And they're just reading as the teletype is coming out. Here's Jordan over here in the way in the far corner. Anything else? Oh, students teaching students. That was my ball game. Yep. Okay. Ah, Doug Foley. There's Dougie. He changed since then.
A little.
Not much. I think y'all found the fountain of youth.
And here's Frank teaching Gail how to use the radar. And Bill, I got a letter from him just recently. Here's Frank doing on, oh yeah, look at this. Oh my God. Plotting and analyzing the maps. Wow. Okay.
Ship reports up there.
Oh yeah. Here's Carl. You can see Carl a little older now, but this was our first where we were in the middle school, and this was our hand-drawn maps. Boy, when I look at them, quite a difference when we got into the high school, and these guys became really professional map drawers. Wow. Yep. Okay. Oh, here's Chris doing in the advanced meteorology picked, but when I would start the class, somebody would have to, number one, do a briefing. Number two, have made a tape, which they were going to play for the radio, and we would critique it. And this is Jordan watching Chris Ortega do the briefing. And here's Jordan. Look at the analyzation of this map. Just gorgeous. Just perfect. Yep. Okay. Hey,
And
Jimmy
Mike.
Hack. Oh, here's Mike and Jimmy singing Mary Had a Little Ham. Oh, they were such sports. Oh, my God, they were such sports. They were true sports. And here's Jimmy looking at teletype. That's only when we
Wow.
had
You know
A.
what? My knees look exactly the same now.
Yeah, Nobby, right. Oh, here I am showing Greg Tripoli on analyzing a map. Yep.
Mhm.
Crazy. This is, oh, Irvy. That's Mr. G. Look at that. Oh my God. Look at what I looked like there. Wow. Holy, look at all the kids there.
Yeah, that was post crew cut, Jim.
Yeah. And what is this? Oh, I guess.
And that, fast forward, this is Jim and Dorna doing our programs
when
together.
we're doing the programs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And this was the audience, and it was every
geez.
audience was engaged, and didn't matter how large the audience was, everybody was focused and having a great time and learning. And then when we called whoever was on that day, the audience was right there, listening with great questions. And you guys really gave to these students in a way that they never would have had this experience before.
Absolutely. And one kid walked out and I heard him say to the other kid, "This was better than recess."
Yes, yes. Yes, I remember that. And then
here's Mikey
Bernie.
with Bernie.
Initially, we were just doing phone calls, and then technology evolved, so we could do, it was Skype back then. But
Mike had us right in AccuWeather, showing us all around. Boy, the kids got some education.
He really did. And
Wow.
Bernie made a great video on the green room, which I gave to the teachers to use, so the kids understood how that worked.
And Bernie was good. You know, he was good, Mike. He gave a good presentation. Well, you did each day, each time. Who's that in the middle? Oh, that's Dorna. I can see.
Look a little different. And that, as we said, they invited me out, and really generous with their time.
Oh,
this
geez.
This is Jim getting his award.
Yeah. Wow. I'm proud of that. It's the best award I ever had.
Yeah.
For sure. These kids worked hard. Oh, look at this. Frank, Jordan, Greg, Mike, and Jimmy. Jimmy Hack.
Yeah.
I don't know where Jimmy is. I miss Jimmy. I don't get in touch with him nearly enough. I will
And
try.
then just this past April, we were able to, some of us were able to get together again.
Look at this. Yeah, my weather watcher from Shrub Oak. And here's Jordan. He's all dressed up. He thinks he's going to a party. Here's Herb. And here's the guru that does all my computer work. He was, I'll tell you how that happened. First day at Lakeland, first class. This kid walks in and he says, "You got room for one more kid?" I look around, every seat was taken. I said, "Yep, sit on the radiator in the back of the room." And he's been with me ever since that. He does all my computer work. He did all the stuff when I was working for the Weather Channel. He did the Weather Channel connection, 1-900 weather. He's a brilliant guy. He does all my long range stuff now. Terrific stuff. Yep. Okay.
And the last picture, and then there we go.
Oh, here we go.
Now, one thing is very clear from seeing these pictures from the 1960s up to the 2020s. We all keep getting better looking every year.
You noticed that too, Mike, huh? Look at this chick. Hey, Bill, thank you for putting this together and all your people in behind the scenes. This gave me a big thrill.
Well, I have to thank Dr. Marks because he gave me your email address, and it all just exploded from there. Dr. Neil Jacobs, anything you want to add? You're standing on the shoulders of some of these great men right here with some of the incredible work you do.
I got nothing. You
got nothing out of it.
I got one thing. Y'all need your own show.
They do.
No, I mean, I totally feel like a fraud learning on punch cards. Like this is absolutely amazing what you all have done for the entire weather enterprise, and I'm just glad we got it documented here so that everyone in the future can listen and learn.
Wow.
Absolutely. Jen Airmore, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just been sitting here just in awe, and thank you all so much for inviting us into the club. And I'm jealous actually, because I think if I had something like this in high school, even if I had it in college, I would be a better meteorologist, because I really did not get involved with weather until my junior year, because we didn't have anything like this in high school. And then I went to Penn State, but I went to a branch campus and we had no weather at the branch campus. And so I was nose diving into the big stuff as a junior. So I think that I got so caught up in all of the learning and the club that I didn't get a chance to do anything before that. And I think I would have learned a lot more if I'd had a Mr. Witt to teach me. But I do have a question. How long did the weather club last? And do you know how many students total went through your program?
Gosh. Probably had 100 kids at least a year. And I started it in 1962. And I left teaching in 1977. So it was in there for 15 years. And then Tim Malloy and some other fellas took over. But in order to run a weather club like that, and Irv will tell you, Mr. G will tell you that it's a lot of work. I would be in there at 5:30, and then was when I was chairman, I had double sessions, which meant I got in there at 5:30, and I finished the first session, which was out about 12, and then the second session came in, and they got out at about 6. So I was in from 5:30 until 6 at night. And then we'd stay sometimes in the weather club later if there was a storm. Of course, we'd be in on Saturdays, right, guys? Sundays, if any kind of storm was heading our way. It was just fun. That's what we did. We had fun, and in spite of it all having fun, we learned something.
And Jim,
when did you have time to coach the baseball team?
Pardon me?
Jim, when did you have time to coach the baseball team? I know you were a coach.
Yeah, I did the varsity baseball coach, but you remember, Frank, in March we closed down the weather club, right? Because we couldn't afford the teletype. So March we closed it down, and then I did baseball, started with the pitches and catches in the gymnasium in the late afternoon, and then during the spring we didn't have weather club. So I would go out and do the coaching then.
Although by about 1968, it was year-round because you actually taught a version of the advanced meteorology class in summer school.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And Donna had me teaching weather at BOCES for teachers, right? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And you did a live broadcast from there.
For Maine.
Station, Bangor, Maine. Yes, that was great.
Because we had to be there early. Yeah.
And Jen, to answer your question, the weather club ended in 81.
81.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Dr. Kim, I've enjoyed watching your face this entire time as I know you've been loving this, and I think you picked the title for tonight's show out of all the wonderful things we've heard. Do you remember what it was?
Goodness, yeah. Sadly, my Zoom crashed at one point.
Yeah.
I came back and then it was gone. But I think it was something like, we were just kids then. We weren't solving the Laplacian yet. This is of course a traditional rite of passage into adulthood for all of us. So
wow.
Yes, who would imagine anything like that being uttered? It just really speaks to how wonderful this club was, and I'm just struck by everybody, your stories. It's not that you all just went into meteorology. You all went, and now you're directors of things and like very key leaders. And you saw those pictures that you had shared, Dorna, and they're all AMS fellows. And I was wondering what the odds were of having two people from a given high school class or within a couple of years even go into this field, let alone this many, and then to achieve what you have achieved. So I think my reflection is just amazement, both at what you were able to get for your students, because you're this case study and you never know until you ask. You made the federal government do more for you than I've seen it ever do, and quickly, for anyone ever. That was a work in and of itself.
What's amazing is these kids that got me the special award from the AMS, when they called me and said, will you come out to Seattle, Washington and get your special award? I had no idea what it was. I said, no, I really don't like to travel. My students almost went nuts when they heard me say no. And then they were telling me, I think Mike Steinberg knows the details on this. I think they only give out 2 of those special awards in the world, don't they, Mike?
Most years they don't give out any. That's why they're so special.
Boy, I thought it was 2 a year in the whole world.
Yeah, most years it's 0.
And that was the first time a high school teacher ever got it.
Well, yeah, that was kind of interesting, because they do give out in total a couple of dozen awards each year, but almost all of them are to people who have PhDs in meteorology and have been professors for 20 years, or researchers, or a much smaller subset of people who have been in actual forecasting, and that's their career. And the idea of a teacher is something, you're still unique.
Yeah, I'll say. I hate to say it that way.
James Adelite, I'm glad you're back for a second. I wanted to catch anything you wanted to say.
You know,
go ahead, Jim.
I've got 2, my parents were both public school teachers, so this is just absolute magic for me to see this. And I guess, I've seen a lot of parallels. I mean, what you guys went through, we're still doing this in the field. The technology is just different. But at what point did you realize how special this was, both Mr. Witt and the students?
I can say I only learned how special it was when these kids started to achieve what they achieved after they left Lakeland. I never knew that they had made such an impact until after a while, when I would see one by one become director, one by one come up with this, that, and the other thing. And all of a sudden I see Mike is a big shot at AccuWeather, and Irv is on television. And I don't know. I guess as I said, to me, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me, that my kids made a difference in weather. And I can say this to you people, I'm not embarrassed about this. I have never taken a course in meteorology. Can you believe that?
I can't. I've been sitting here wondering, we didn't cover this, what your background was to go into this, because I'll be honest, even if I was to think about trying to assemble today what you had assembled, and I have a bachelor's and master's degree in meteorology, and then a lot of advanced training, just working, in a federal lab for years. Yep. I would still feel really intimidated by the prospect of trying to put something together. How did you do it?
I don't know. I hate to say this, but the kids taught me a lot of weather. My own students. You remember, I would say to them, when I learn something new, I'll teach you. If you learn something new, teach me. And they did. And I read everything, and I studied, and I studied how to present it so that they would understand it. And I guess I was given a gift to be a good teacher. I know that. Nothing I did. I was given a gift, and I used it. I didn't waste it. And I had great kids, and they made something out of me.
And Jim, what you said before is one of the reasons why, when you asked me to write the article, I wanted to, because, as a teacher, you don't often know the impact of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And it could be one word, one book, one lesson that changes a student's life. And sadly, teachers really don't know. And what's so wonderful is that, you know, your students are still with you. And for any student out there, if your life was changed by a teacher, let them know. That is so important to give them that feedback. And, you know, it's been so gratifying to see it on both sides from my perspective.
Yeah. You know, Irv said to me the other day, you get accolades and you're still alive. People don't get that until they're dead. Isn't that something that people say, well, you did a good job, Jim. Okay. You know, I tried, I worked hard, and I had good kids to work with. Let's put it that way. Terrific.
Yeah, so I want to answer Jim's questions. The first time I realized what you'd done for me was when I took my first meteorology class in college and realized I was ahead of all the seniors in what I knew. And you know, I'm talking about 850 millibar, 500 millibar advection and vorticity advection, and these kids are going, what the hell? You know, what are you talking about? You know, this is our first class. What are you doing? You know, and even when I went to MIT, you know, Fred Sanders told me, well, you teach them the stuff about the SQT. You know, you know what you're doing.
Well, that's good. I'm glad
Well, Dr. Span, it's been an incredible show. I know you want to jump in real quick and say anything. I know you would have loved to have had this at your high school for sure.
No, nobody ever told me when I was in high school that meteorology was even a viable career option. I mean, that's why I went into engineering to start with. I mean, this is amazing to me. But Jim, I got to ask, and we do have to wrap up here in a second. I hate to do that, but this has been so good. There are a lot of high school teachers listen to this show. So what could you tell them for those that have been inspired by this story about maybe starting their own weather club? What's some advice?
Well, yeah, that's a hard question. I would say that the teacher that wanted to do this, let's say it's a history teacher or an English teacher, it doesn't have to be a science teacher. Say to the kids, anybody here interested in weather? Would you like to know when it's going to snow? Would you like to know when we're going to have days off and stuff like that? Why don't we start a club and I'll teach you what I know. And when you learn something new, you teach us and see if we can't make something happen. And everything now is free on the internet. Everything is free. Anybody can teach exactly what I taught, and it would cost the school $0. That's
on
what
your
they
website.
should.
It's on Jim's website.
Oh, yeah. You could go to my website, and I have the whole Lakeland curriculum on there. Even radar, satellites, how to forecast tomorrow's temperature, yesterday, the whole thing. And I even have an advanced section if you want to do advection of this and that and all that, you know, that they were talking about. It's there for somebody that's advanced. How to plot and analyze maps. How many inches of snow do you get if it's moderate snow for 3 hours? Everything, the whole nine, all my tricks are on the internet. It's called The Weather Wiz, WIZ.com. TheWeatherWiz.com.
And that will make that Jim's pick of the week. Bill, what do you say, huh?
I say that's going to be the best pick of this week for sure.
Well, listen, I'm sorry.
Can I sum it up? Can I sum it up in one word to answer your question?
Go, Dawn.
Tenacity. That's what it takes. And that's what Jim had.
I like it. I like it. Well, listen, I can't thank all of you enough. It's been a remarkable program. I think we're all mesmerized by hearing these stories. And for those that are watching, seeing it. But thanks to all of you. And we're going to take a break. And for anybody that wants to stay, you're welcome to do that. We've got to come back with picks of the week. Jen, we're going to do some email right after your tornado talk segment here. But I know a lot of you have to go, and we thank you for being here. It was a great night. But if you want to stay, you're welcome to stay. We'll be here about 15 more minutes. But at this point, we have to pause. We're going to hit Tony Rice and his astronomy report. Ooh. We will have Jen's This Week in Tornado History. We'll have the email picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Well, all you muffins, it was so good.
I don't know if anybody can hear me, but this is number 864. I was hoping that we would have 867 because I was going to come on and go 867-5309 and
trending shorter. Short day records fell several times in 2020, and the shortest day in recorded history occurred just this past June 29th. But why the shift? We're not really sure, but there are a few theories. Recent large earthquakes have been shown to redistribute enough mass in the Earth to impact rotation. Another theory points to melting glaciers and polar ice caps. This adds water to the oceans, changes circulation, but it also increases pressure on the ocean floor, which in theory brings it closer to the axis of rotation. Remember our figure skater from before. But the most intriguing theory is movement of the geographic poles, known as the Chandler Wobble. This is named for an American astronomer who first described it in 1891. Think of a spinning top. Now think of what happens to the speed of that top as it begins to wobble. So why do we care? If the recent trend of shorter days continues, there's concern that a negative leap second might be needed, and we're not really sure how our highly networked technology world might handle that. Previous leap second additions have crashed websites and caused airline delays. But this is also worth keeping an eye on by the weather enterprise, if just from a science communication point of view, because if you stand back and look at those trends over decades and longer versus the day-to-day ebb and flow of the length of day, it looks a lot like the climate versus weather discussion. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me on Twitter at RTPHokey for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a significant tornado struck parts of the Cincinnati metro area during the evening time of August 9th, 1969. It was one of 10 tornadoes confirmed on this day and one of 2 F3s. The other F3 hit portions of Marion County, Indiana, resulting in over 150 injuries. This tornado developed 8 miles to the north-northeast of downtown Cincinnati. Numerous communities were hit in Hamilton and Claremont counties. For the storm data narrative, the greatest damage and most injuries were from Hartwell to Reading. Within the tornado's path, close to 2,500 homes had some sort of damage. 27 of those homes were demolished. 247 injuries were recorded, and there were 4 fatalities. Mrs. Elphia Taylor was killed after her car was flipped several times. Mrs. Carolyn DeBoard and 2 of her 4 sons were killed in their collapsed apartment building. Read more about this tornado event and hundreds more at tornadotalk.com.
Okie dokie. Time now to dive into the email inbox and just maybe something's in there this week.
All right, I do have a couple of emails. First of all, from our friend James Lewis. For warnings such as flash flood warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings, how is verification done? For a flash flood warning, does the warning verify based on rain totals or the rate of water rising or something else? And then for a severe thunderstorm warning, is it a single gust to severe levels or a single hailstone? How does all the verification work? Anyway.
Well, let's don't all talk at once. We need our NOAA officials to speak on that. Rick is not here.
I was going to say, this is where I was so excited for Rick to be able to address this question. And we had, after that note came in, we did have a little bit of internal discussion with Rick in our email thread, because the one of the reasons this is such a great question is these observations are very challenging to get. And so what Rick laid out for us in even the Norman CWA is verification depends so much on the legwork of the forecast office, being able to make calls. They have a whole network of trusted people. And by trusted, I mean just people who volunteered in the past information, who maybe work at a convenience store or something. They just have a relationship. They have a whole book of people. This is how this is done in 2022. And they call these people, or those people call them, and you can ask them if they, do they think that the wind exceeded severe criteria, like their own eyes. And we all know how extremely difficult it is to accurately judge wind speed with eyes and just blowing objects. And hailstone measurement is a little bit better because you have a physical object to measure. But yes, single hailstones can verify a warning. Single wind reports from spotters like that can verify a warning. And, there was a good discussion last week about things like trees falling. Do those verify warnings? And that's a challenging area because what makes those things fall is so complicated. So anyway, all that to say, great question, and a very, very challenging thing to do very well.
Great, thanks, Kim. And then one more email for us here from Chris White, and he wanted to clarify this is a serious question. With almost every strong to severe thunderstorm being labeled a supercell on social media these days, should the definition of a supercell be clarified or changed? Anyone?
What would James Browning think? That's the question.
I don't think its definition of a supercell needs to change. I mean, it is what it is, and you can't control hype and all this other stuff. No, in my opinion, no.
Yeah, I would agree on that one.
Maybe social media needs to change.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, bingo. Finally, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for your emails. We've had some great suggestions for guests, and I know Bill is working hard to try to figure all that out and get the calendar even more full. So thank you for sending those in and all your questions and compliments and all that. We just really appreciate it. So send us your email at weatherbrains.com. And also don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, because that's cool. Thursday mornings, you get that and some great articles. And you may get one from me this week on something history-wise. And that's going to come out every Thursday morning in your email box. Back to you, James.
Okay. And again, I know we're running long this week, but it was worth it. This was a great show. But let's quickly go around the horn. Everybody do their pick of the week. Jen, while you got the mic hot there, let's just open with you.
Yeah, mine is not weather related. We all have folks in our life that we admire. And I am not a huge fangirl when it comes to celebrities, but there was one person that was truly one of my heroes. And this was Olivia Newton-John. And we found out just a few hours ago that she did pass away. And so my pick of the week is the Facebook post that leads to, you can look at her fund that she, and the things that she was working on. She was battling cancer. This is the third bout of it. But I sang her songs since I could sing. Probably my first full sentences was to Magic in the late 70s. I remember singing that in the car. And so I just was belting out some of her tunes before we got on the show, but it's just a very inspirational lady, beautiful voice, and also a great humanitarian. So that's my pick of the week.
Yeah. And a lot of people know this. When I was in high school and college, I worked my way through there playing rock and roll music at a radio station. And goodness, it was the glory days of Olivia Newton-John. That song, I Honestly Love You. Oh man, it would make you melt. Oh man. But that was, anyway, that's a great pick. And it's such a tragic bit of news today. All right, Kim, let's go over to you. Do you have a pick of the week for us this week?
Yep, mine also musical in nature. I picked.
This is good. This is good.
Yes,
this is the most incredible thing ever.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and Jimmy Fallon had Kevin Bacon on to sing in a little segment that they were calling, sort of the first draft of popular songs. And so they were singing the song, a remake of the song Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears. And if you know the lyrics of that song, there's a brief mention of talking about the weather. It's almost a throwaway line, it sets the stage for some of the song to come. But they decided to make that the entire song, and it was fantastic. Just them singing about being meteorologists, and that song is from the 80s, so they played off of the fact that it would have been like the 4-day forecast, and oh my gosh, it was really, really great. If you haven't seen it, it's worth your time. It'll make you smile.
Oh, it is absolute gold. And again, all the pics will be up on weatherbrains.com. Neil, what you got for us this week?
I almost opted for the foghorn because I knew whatever I picked it was not going to compete with Kim's pick.
Exactly.
But all this talk about synoptic meteorology and everything else got me thinking about a paper that I read, came out in June in the journal Geoscientific Model Development by Christoph Fischer. And the title of the paper is A Novel Method for Objective Identification of 3D Potential Vorticity Anomalies. And it's a really cool paper, and it's got even cooler graphics. But again, if you got limited time, just go on YouTube and watch Kim's pick instead.
Okay. And again, I would want to reinforce again what Jim told us about theweatherwiz.com. That's a great site. So Bill Murray, let me kick it back over to you for your pick of the week and the future show guests.
Yeah, James, I'll take the foghorn just to hear the dulcet tones once a week. I'm not the same without it.
There you go. You got it.
I'm going to pick WeatherBrains for A64 as my pick of the week, because I will be listening to this one again and again. James, in 2 weeks, we'll be live from the National Weather Association in Pittsburgh. Very excited about that. Going to be there right after the RON, the Research and Operations Nexus. And then on Monday the 29th, we'll have Sean Sublette. That's going to be a fun show. And then Chrissy Hurley from the National Weather National is going to join us on the 12th of September. And we'll talk more about the Waverly flood that happened earlier, that disastrous flood that occurred in Tennessee. I can't say thank you enough to all the crew that came out tonight. You were all enthusiastic and fun to herd together. But Jim Witt, we just appreciate you for what you've done, and Dr. Marks, thank you for for giving me Mr. Witt's email address.
It was my pleasure, and I did have a pick. Go to the NOAA page about the 7 sail drones we just launched for hurricane season. Bill will post it with I know the show enough that I know I better have a pick when I come on.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want James giving me the foghorn.
Yeah, no, right. Frank, you got it. That's a great pick. Anybody else have anything else any other business we need to conduct here before we got to wrap this thing up? Again, this was a great show. It was just enthralling. So thanks to everybody for being on the show tonight. Thanks to all of you for watching and listening. For those that are new, we typically do the show Monday nights at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel. But most of you listen to the podcast version, the audio podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. We love hearing from you, and all of our picks of the week. All the notes will be up on weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you all. My favorite show ever.
Awesome.